Voluntary carbon markets are becoming key in the fight to get carbon out of the world economy, but they can be complicated. BeZero Carbon is the world's largest provider of ratings-based risk analysis for private sector investment in environmental solutions and emissions reduction. That involves scientific know-how, machine learning, market research, data technology, earth sciences, and plenty more. I sat down here at COP28 to talk to CEO Tommy Ricketts and Chief Ratings Officer Teresa Hartmann. Well, there's no denying that this gathering, this COP, is way bigger than previous ones. And so I guess plenty of opportunities for you guys in the private sector to explore your sectors more.
Yeah, look, it's far bigger than COP26 is the last one I went to. And you're getting the whole value chain here, everyone from the big project developers in the emerging countries all the way through to the end buyers, corporates looking to go and actually invest in these projects from the ground up. And it's been great to see that kind of excitement here.
You've been doing some panels, right?
Yeah, no, I've done about 10 panels in 4 days. Been quite breathless, some better attended than others.
Yeah, and good stuff for you as well, Teresa?
Yeah, same here. It's the Carbon Markets COP, so we're seeing really good announcements come out from John Kerry, from the World Bank, from the voluntary space. So really Carbon Markets COP this year.
Okay, let's take this to the studio and talk about it in a bit more detail. Teresa, Tommy, great to see you. Thanks for coming in. First of all, tell us a bit about voluntary carbon markets and how BeZero's rating system fits into that world.
Thanks for having us. So the voluntary carbon market is a space where companies that can't mitigate their emissions come to try to buy these things called carbon credits, which are essentially the result of project-based interventions like protecting rainforests or regrowing trees or transitioning fuel uses. And they're saying, right, I can buy these credits as a way of compensating for the mitigation or mitigating the activities that I was otherwise be doing and wouldn't otherwise be able to decarbonize.
So people don't know that much about VCMs. Many are even suspicious of them, but you believe that they have real potential for the future, don't you?
They definitely do. So if you look at climate change overall, we're still emitting something like 30 gigatons more carbon than we can absorb, right? And we really need to bring that down, and we need to bring that down as fast as we can. So the question is, like, where do we get the greatest reductions and how can we pay for the greatest reductions the fastest, right? So if your dollar buys you 1 ton here, it might buy you 10 tons somewhere else. So carbon markets are basically the way to make sure that our dollar buys us the greatest possible emission reductions and the greatest possible climate action.
So Tommy, is this a way of a company buying itself a clean slate, being able to get away with doing its part? Should we look at it like that at all?
No, I think the first thing to say would be it's often the first way a company actually pays for its emissions. So setting a price on your emissions is the first and vital action that a company can do to actually start addressing it. And a lot of research out there today suggests that those companies that set a price and buy carbon credits are much more likely to actually decarbonize because they're actually starting to internalize what we always call an externality and address those emissions. So quite the opposite, actually. By buying these credits, they're signaling to themselves that these sources of pollutions have a cost to the business and they're looking to address them.
So clients that come to you are looking to you to clarify any questions they might have on that score.
They are trying to clarify where the risks are, right? So they will look at a project and the project is generating credits, right? So emission reductions or emission removals. And the clients are going to try and understand what is the risk attached to buying and using this credit, right? So the permanence risk, the carbon accounting risk, is this really a ton of carbon?
And briefly, is this about clients trying to protect their investment or looking to do something positive for the planet?
I think that it's both, and I think that it should be both, right? So it's very much companies in the voluntary market. They're taking voluntary action. They're going above and beyond what they're regulated to do. They don't need to be doing this, so they are making a positive contribution. However, if you're out there and you're putting your own brand out there and you're trying to make a positive contribution, you want to be sure that you're funneling your money into the right kind of project that actually has an impact, right? So it's both your reputational risk, your financial risk, but also the climate impact that you're trying to create on the ground.
Okay, so Teresa, tell me a bit about avoidance and removal.
So effectively, there's different climate projects, right? And some climate projects try to suck carbon out of the atmosphere, and the easiest way to do that is to plant a tree, right? The biomass that the tree grows will suck carbon out of the atmosphere. There's also technological solutions for this, but basically the idea of a removal is let's bring carbon out of the atmosphere and store it somewhere in a tree, geologically, compress it, whatever you want to do with it. Avoidance is a credit or a project that reduces emissions, right? So it's avoiding an emission that otherwise would have happened. So we could have avoided fossil fuels when we have fossil fuel switching. We could have avoided deforestation, right? So if we protect an area, we are avoiding the emissions that would have come from deforesting that area.
And in the case of fossil fuels, how do you avoid using fossil fuels? Not using them when otherwise you might have?
By not extracting them, right? So like nowadays we're talking a lot about ending coal, phasing out coal, right? And like, is there a way to finance a coal phase out with carbon credits? Like that's a huge debate in the space at the moment, right? Or you could move away from one fossil-based fuel and move into a renewable fuel. Then you're avoiding emissions.
So you deploy extraordinary levels of data, technology, research, even brain power. You do the heavy lifting, if you like. What does the client get from that?
First of all, they get a rating of a project, which essentially is a fundamental assessment of, is it doing what it claims? And breaking that down into its constituent parts, explaining how it's performed, in which ways, how it compares to everyone else, what the risks might be associated with the decisions it's made, is a really valuable way of it, just of those entities understanding whether they're having a climate impact or whether they're actually, their money is going to the right avenues. The other side of doing it is an information platform. So on that platform, we call it BeZero Carbon Markets. They can log in, they can do some modeling, they can compare and contrast stuff, they can read through all of the literature, understand things like, if I zoom into this geography using geospatial software, what is the dynamics in that area, all the way through to modeling the different types of risks associated with different projects. So you can do that sort of analytics assessment on the platform, and the rating stands alone as a piece of sort of analytical contribution to what the actual quality of that project is.
So anyone engaging in a positive project like that, or potentially positive project like that, do they know you're out there? Do they come to you and say, hey, look, this is what we're doing? Or are you out there scouting for potential projects that you can then bring into the VCM?
So these projects really exist. So we're not originating, we're not investing, we're not buying or selling. The reason they come to us is because they want a third-party independent assessment of the extent to which they are delivering their claims. Is it additional, i.e. should the money have gone to this project? Is there accurate carbon accounting? The sort of the things you see in the press about, are the trees really there? Or, how much actual carbon is it sequestering? And then are they really there for as long as they claim they'll be there? Was there a fire there 30 years later or whatever? And what they want from us is to say, I don't just want to take their word from the seller. I don't just want to take the word from the developer. I want to actually have my own independent way of looking at it, and that's where they come to us. So you see what I mean? They're not trying to say, okay, they normally commission us. They'll say, come and look at this project, tell us what you think, or we'll have looked at it because it's it's a very large project and we get asked by lots of people. So we might get paid, or we might also just do it for ourselves.
So at somewhere like COP28, where all these issues are being discussed to varying degrees of activity and varying degrees of interest and all the rest of it, how much are people aware already in gatherings like this of what you do? How much do you dovetail already into these kind of climate mitigation systems? How close are you to policy, for example?
I think more and more so, right? So like ratings agencies are a fairly new actor in the carbon market. They're obviously a well-known actor in financial markets. Right now, ratings agencies, you mostly see us acting on the voluntary market, right? And what's exciting about COP here is that there's an article in the negotiation that would create a global international carbon market, right? And that's really interesting because that's where we're going to see some convergence of these projects that exist today that are selling their credits into the voluntary market could then come under a global scheme and help us reduce emissions at the global level, right? So these markets are starting to come together, and that for us also means that we need to start thinking about how we support global carbon markets and the countries that are implementing them. And
in terms of the debates here, how much are you bringing fresh material that people are interested in? I know you've been on quite a few panels already.
Yeah, well, you have to ask the audience if it's fresh material. I think the key thing from our side is that countries are looking to go and invest in projects internationally and import the positive climate impacts that are happening in other countries as a way of meeting their own nationally defined contributions. And so they're looking to people like us to say, how should I think about this? What type of projects are better or worse? What are the risks? And so we're helping with them with that architecture. That's what we contribute to the debate at COP.
So do you see yourself as setting a blueprint that will only grow and become something more standardized? I suppose the thrust of the question is, how niche are you at the moment? How confident are you about that niche?
So today we have about 100 clients globally. Most of those clients are blue chip companies. So although the market, I'd say, itself is quite niche, I think there's a statistic that the voluntary carbon market is less than the global dog food market. So it's not a huge market globally. So within that, although increasingly we're showing that we can actually, prices and ratings are correlated. So that idea that, the idea that we've shown that higher quality should be rewarded with higher prices. But I think on a global level, when it comes to countries, we're certainly on the niche. And they're looking to us, though, increasingly as a way of saying, you have the expertise, how can you teach us to think about in this space? And we're looking to them to say, you have the power, the legislative, the buying capacity to say, we can actually make this a real thing. So,
yeah. Do you feel this has the same kind of traction in the growing economies? I imagine much of the traction you're getting is from the developed companies, from the developed economies, from the bigger companies. But can you see this model working also in the global south where things operate differently?
I mean, it's both, right? Like the buyers and the financial intermediaries sit in the global north, right? That's where the money is, that's where the offtake is happening. The investment is actually happening in the global south, right? So you can also think about carbon projects as a way to transfer wealth and create more equitable development for the global south, right? So there's projects mostly in, think about them in rainforests, think about them in areas where there's still a lot of transport and energy being deployed. And these projects are actually in the global south. And that's where the investment is flowing, right? And there's tons and tons of research looking at how much money can we really transfer through carbon markets. And it's huge, right? So it's actually both sides that are benefiting. And I think as we're seeing these economies develop, we will see more demand from emerging markets as well.
I mean, you've got 150 people spread all over the world, kind of beavering away in areas of their own expertise. What's the root of this? Where does a BeZero person come from? For you personally, where do you come from? What do you bring to this?
Where did I come from? I think we actually have really complementary backgrounds, right? So I came from policy, very much worked on climate policy and decarbonisation for the private sector, sat at the UN, sat at the World Economic Forum, and then eventually moved into more of an NGO, standard setting space. Whereas Tommy has a completely different background.
I also started in policy, but more public policy, and then worked as a sell-side analyst, so doing financial research. But I think if you look more broadly across the company, there's 3 or 4 big skill sets. You've got the engineers, the actual software and data engineers that are doing the hardcore heavy lifting on the data and the product. And then beyond that, you have 3 types of researchers. You have the policy, you have financial background, and then a myriad of different scientists. And for me, the BeZero is actually itself a little microcosm of the very type of economic activities that we're hoping that the climate economy will deliver in general.
And you personally, Tommy Ricketts, are you in the right place now? Have you landed where you know you're supposed to be?
I hope so. I certainly feel I wake up every day with fire in my belly. But the key thing, I think, from a lot of us who have been career professionals in their mid-30s, they see this happening, they see this big 20, 30-year trend, and they want to get on that train and do everything they can to help. I think voting with your career is the biggest thing you can do.
Yeah, Tommy and Teresa, pleasure talking to you both. Thanks very much.
Thank you.